the structure for this morning, I'm really aware that we've got a range of experiences here in the room when it comes to this thing that we call bike share. We have some people that maybe have only started thinking about bike share for as little as 3 weeks. I know that some of you have been looking at it in more detail for 3 months, maybe some even 3 years. The company that Sebastian works for has been doing bike share for 13 years. Myself, the Nextbike New Zealand, 10 years ago. It's the celebrations. So I wanted to try and go through some bike share basics, if you like, some things that we really know and understand in this industry. That we know if you do them, you have a very, very high chance of success if you have your objectives clearly mapped out. Okay. So I'd like to take you through that 5 to 10 minutes, and then we'll hand over to Rob, who will give us a bit of an insight into what we've done in Christchurch. Christchurch is unique and fantastic for so many brilliant reasons, and I think it's worth sort of highlighting that, and then we'll jump into the insights from Sebastian. And a little bit more about Sebastian. Sebastian works for Nextbike GmbH, which does all of the technology and the bikes end to end, really, if you want to think about it in that way. Particularly instrumental in setting up Nextbike UK. It's got 6 cities now operating in the UK, correct me if I'm wrong with that. Equally instrumental setting up Nextbike America. So there are 4 cities operating in America using the Nextbike platform, and hot off the press, sorting out India.
Oh yeah.
Sorting out India. So
quite a challenge yet.
It's quite a challenge, yeah. I learned recently, despite talking with Seb many times over the last 5 or 6 years, that he studied in India. So for a while, which I thought was quite interesting. So 2 cities in India. Thank you so much for coming all this way.
It's a big pleasure to be here. Thank you very much for all of you coming.
Cool. All right. So some bike share basics. I have, over the last 10 years, I had a look at my contacts book recently. I have met many hundreds of people, it turns out, talking about bike share over the last 10 years. And one of the things that I've noticed over these hundreds of meetings is that people, certainly when they're first looking at it, will fixate on just one issue, one part of the mix, and say, oh, it couldn't possibly work because of this one reason here. Or, oh, it really could work because of this one reason just here. And I found it really very useful to use what you might call the retail paradigm for looking at bike share and how it should be successful. So really thinking about who are my people that are going to ride, really thinking about the location or the place where those people live and work, really paying attention to understanding how many bicycles or rental stations we need to put into those locations, so the quantity side of things. We really then need to think about the price that the bikes need to go out for those people. We need to think about the times that they're available for, or the length of what we might call the free ride period that would be at the beginning of any ride, before you start to worry about the actual product itself, the bicycle. I find this quite a useful, intuitive way of thinking about it. Yeah? So, with that in mind, I'm going to build something in front of you here, without it being PowerPoint. So, I'll kill you, right? So, all right. Was that a round of applause for not doing it now? Absolutely. Thank you. All right. So. I'm going to need a little bit more space than that. Let's just have it down a smidgen. In terms of the people that use bike share, we know that they are typically walking or currently using public transport in the area where the bikes are. So, first principle, as far as your people are concerned. Riders will be currently walking or using public transport almost certainly within your central city. That's the market that's going to get on to your bikes and ride them. got a specific example here from locally. So if we look at what's happened in Melbourne and Brisbane, these aren't Nextbike systems, but it's a local context, if you like. We know that 83% of riders work within 500 meters of a rental station. So put that together with the fact that those people are probably walking to get errands done or probably using short public transport. But so you start to get a little bit of a picture of that kind of person. Yeah? And you can then start to maybe quantify how many of those people there might be. Right? If any of you have bought a house recently or watched any one of the many house renovation programs, you know that location is always touted as a super important thing with houses. It's no different with retail, and for me it comes straight after you've thought about your rider, your customer. Yeah? So the place or the location where your bikes or your rental stations are going to be. So we know that bike share thrives where it's quick and easy to use a bicycle. So for example, you've got some streets out here with what we might call in urban design terms a protected cycle path. Okay, so physically protected cycle path. It doesn't have to be cycle paths. Actually, low speed, low volume roads we know are still very attractive for riding. Okay? So what does that environment look like? Is it relatively quick and easy for people to get around that place where you're putting your bikes? And then it's also important that it's hard, that it's slow and expensive to get around by other means. Yeah? So the other means might be is it congested? Have you got so many cars in your central city, or have you got so many roadworks in your central city that it's actually very hard to get around? Or to take an Auckland example, you're tearing up the underground to build train stations, so there's lots of underground works happening there. You've now got 3, 4, 5 years in a rebuild phase or in a big capital project phase like Auckland is, where it's actually very slow to move around by car. It's actually quite slow to move around by bus as well. Yeah? And then the other thing that we find is if there's an expense for moving around, so actually your cost of parking is really quite high, for example. And again, that's the sort of thing that would help bike share thrive. Okay? Being aware of that in the place that you're planning to operate. Quantities of bikes. Sorry, studies. Looking at the systems around the world that work particularly well, we know that somewhere between 10 to 30 bikes per 1,000 people that might be living in your central city is an interesting benchmark to work around. You use that as a way of figuring out how many bikes that you might put into your operational area. And then related to that is the number of actual rental stations, so the places where you can actually go and pick up these bikes. If this is true, that 83% of riders are working within 500 meters, then a density of rental station locations through your area where you're planning on working is vital. Okay? We would suggest that it's somewhere between 10 to 16 rental stations per square kilometre of operational area. At 10 rental stations per square kilometre, you might be walking 250 metres, 300 metres, yeah, to a bike track. We know that cyclists like to be able to lock their bike up right outside the front door of the place they're going to. who was it that tried to lock their own bike to our rental station sign downstairs? It is. It should be one of the upsides, right, for cycling, is that you can pick up a bike from right outside where you want to start your trip, and you should be able to drop your bike off again, more or less outside. At 16 rental stations, yeah, you're getting closer to 200, 250 meters maximum walk that you might ever need to do to get to a station. Quantity. Price. We know that these bikes work from a price point of view. If you can find a way of making the bikes quick, easy, attractive, yeah? So finding some way of making the first chunk of riding, you might call it free if you like. Yeah? So how do we price this such that is the case? Clearly, when businesses come in and operate this, they still have costs. You know, there's significant capital cost in buying bikes. There's significant capital cost in operating the bikes safely. You can't necessarily cover that if you're not charging anything for the riding side of things. So what we would normally talk about is that there are some dollars that come from local government, and there are some dollars that come from a rider subscription. So the rider pays a small amount. You might call it a season's pass if you want to use a golfing or a skiing analogy, or you might just call it a subscription. So a nominal amount, maybe it's $1 a week. And that gives them the ability to then ride as many times as they like for short trips. And those trips should hopefully be one-way trips. Interesting little transport trips. Okay. And then there's a third chunk of revenue, which is to have a branding partner on bicycles. In the corner here, you'll see Spark on the bicycles, and Spark is the branding partner for all the work that Rob has done over the last 2 years, which you'll hear about for Christchurch in a minute or two. For those of you that are newer to bike share and haven't done much in the transport space before, this idea that there is some government money and some rider money is a model that looks quite familiar from public transport. We wouldn't have a big network of buses working and operating if it wasn't for some local government help to make that happen. It would just be very specific highlighted routes that would be working, and the outer line suburbs wouldn't get serviced at all. This idea of branding, sometimes you see on the side of light rail and buses, you do see branding partners, or more typically what we might refer to as advertising. So the advertising is only there for a month at a time. Yeah. Branding might mean that you're invested with the bikes for the life of the bikes. Okay. One of the reasons that we have Seb here is that he's actually very tall. So if he was able to, no, could you put it above that one?
Okay.
Excellent.
Works, yeah?
Yeah,
okay.
I think that's maybe there. Wing and a prayer. Sure. Okay. Sorry. So, and at this point here was that. Yeah. Do you want to just stand on?
Can we just put it here? Or? The stickers are too far away, so it's.
We might have technology.
You can get over here.
Try it.
Give it one more chance. So I mentioned that the branding partner might be there for the length of time that you put the bicycles out. Time is the fourth thing that we really need to think about as far as the retail paradigm or the retail mix goes. So The bikes themselves, in a landlocked environment, you would hope that they would last 5 years, give or take. In a maritime climate, like we have in Wellington, for example, or like we have in Auckland, you're probably going to need to bring that back a year. The salt air is corrosive, and so somewhere between 4 to 5 years is the sort of life expectancy of the bikes. At that point, you're going to need to do something very dramatic with the bikes to breathe life back into them. Or, maybe you choose to strip absolutely everything off and get them professionally repainted, put the new technology back on them. All right, so. Again, sort of related to time, it's very nice to kick these things off in summer as people are starting to think about the nicer weather for riding. One of the interesting things that happens in retail, though, is that summer starts in about 6 weeks' time. Yeah, so, this lady here is laughing. So that they think early for summer, yeah, and they recognize that they build up into summer. Yeah? They don't kick off in November, yeah, they kick off in July, August, yeah, for summer. I think it's very useful if you're putting out a reasonable size scale system that you would actually put it out at the end of winter or beginning of spring, yeah, to use terms we understand, recognizing that demand is going to go up. Yeah, as local learnings might go up. So that's an interesting way to think about the timing side of things. And then the other thing that we have on here is that when you're ordering a reasonable number of bikes for a bike share system, it takes time to get them here. Yeah, and it's typically 6 months to place an order and for them to be delivered from wherever they're at. So you can think of a 6-month lead time. Yeah. It's holding quite nicely. Well done.
That's what I'm here for.
That's okay. All right. Now, if you've got these 5 things, right, at that point you can actually really start to make some good informed decisions about the product, the actual product that you're going to invest in. Or bikes by any other name, right? So we know that the bikes need to come with features that make them attractive for transport. Yeah. So full suspension bikes, maybe you don't need full suspension bikes for transport. What you need for transport is you need things that will keep you dry if the road is wet. You need places to carry your luggage. Yeah? You need easy gears that are intuitive for people to use. Okay? You need comfortable seats for people that maybe aren't used to sitting on bicycles for a while. A kickstand, so that if you've gone to the cafe to meet a friend, you're keeping the bike for that period of time, you can put the kickstand down and head on in. A particular feature of the bicycles that we make use of from Nextbike is that they come with their own cable lock, which does actually allow you to keep that bike for a little bit longer, but go in and do an errand. Yeah. So, and then we know that these bikes, even in particularly large cities, where they have very, very large numbers of bike share bikes, we know that they're only used for trips of about 1, possibly all the way up to 5 kilometers. So that's that stat of people riding 1 to 5. That comes from London, where they're at 6,000 bicycles, 7,000?
Or more, but in the meantime, I think it's more than 10,000.
Oh,
11,000.
Yeah. So you can imagine the sort of, what would the square kilometers be for, it must be nudging 200 square kilometers, I would think.
Sorry, I don't have the figure at the moment.
So even in a city like that, we know that it's only sort of 1 to 5 kilometers, which goes back to this idea that your people are doing currently, that are going to be using the bike share bikes, are doing short walking trips, yeah, or short trips by public transport. Okay. And then finally, a feature for your bikes, particularly in New Zealand, particularly in Australia, is that they need to come with helmets. and that those helmets need to be released at the same time as you rent the bicycles. It shouldn't be an extra step, it shouldn't be in another location, it shouldn't be a requirement to bring it yourself. It should be just like seatbelts in rental cars. You can't rent a car without a seatbelt. Whether you choose to put it on, that's up to you at that point. But you've given people the chance to do that. And as I mentioned before, this is our 10th year of operating, and we've provided helmets for the last 10 years now, and have had no problems at all with doing it. And you're welcome to have a look and see what it takes to do that. I had someone joke the other day that it does genuinely look like a number 8 wire solution, which is a Kiwi term, Seb, I think.
Time is over.
And the final thing I want to say about helmets is, if you've got these other 5 things right, the fact that we have a compulsory helmet law doesn't need to crucify the use of the system. It really doesn't. I think we could say that it might have a percentage point or 2 difference, but it doesn't need to crucify the use of the system if you've done your planning right and you've nailed all